Hello, everyone, and most welcome. I hope you can hear me. I'd like to extend hearty wishes from the Lodge of Quattro Coronati number 2076 to all of you. I'm Andreas Sennefors, the Worshipful Master. It's also midsummer, which is a traditional day for us Freemasons to gather and to feast, which we unfortunately won't be able to do this year. Hopefully next. And some places in the world, lodges have been opening again. But I'm still happy to see quite a few of you here today. I hope there have not been any big confusions with the time. 4 o'clock in Britain, 5 o'clock continental European time. Most welcome, all of you from wherever you are. The order of the day is that our brother Hugh Neal, today's speaker, will talk about his paper, John Sherwood and his Neo-Union Manuscripts, and give us a short recap, because most certainly most of you have read the paper. It's online on our website, quattrocoronati.com, and he also delivered his talk on our YouTube channel. So what we are going to do here today is to listen to your talk, to your recap, Brother Hugh, and then we will open a question and answer session with myself. Traditionally, if you would be in lodge in London, the master of the lodge always starts with his vote of thanks, and now just admits a couple of people. I think. Yes, here we go. And then we will open a round of more discussions. Most welcome those of you who just have joined us. So without further ado, I will hand over the microphone, if I had one, to the speaker and author of the paper, Hugh Neal, and welcome you to talk about John Sherwood and his Neo-Union Manuscripts. What a nice discovery. So please, Brother Hugh, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Andreas, and welcome to all the brethren present here. It's a great pleasure to be here and to be able to present this initial small paper. Now, just a quick word about myself. I've been a member of Quattro Coronati for some years, and obviously the correspondence circle for quite a number of years before that. I was initiated back in 1959 in Derbyshire, which is in the middle of this wonderful country of ours. And during all that time, I've met a number of people who know an awful lot more about Freemasonry and its history than I do, but I keep trying my little best. So here is a small effort. Now, quite some years ago, I think it was about 2004 or something like that, I came across the inventory of a lodge that I'm in Chichester, which is on the south coast of England, when I was looking after the inventory there. And I immediately recognized that it was of some import. I was involved in all sorts of other things. I was about to go into the chair there, and following that, I was its secretary for about 7 years. So a lot of my time was taken up with that sort of stuff. I've now got around to really having a good detailed look at this. And, well, let's kick off. The writer of the manuscript, a chap called John Sherwood. He lived from 1777 to 1867. He was 90 years old when he eventually died. I have his death certificate, or a copy of it. So there's no doubt about all of that. He was a lawyer by profession. He was initiated in our Lodge of Antiquity, number 1 in London, now number 2. He was initiated there on the 22nd of January, 1812, the year before our union of the two Grand Lodges. In 1814, just before he moved to Chichester, moved his lawyer business. He was a lawyer by profession. He moved out to Chichester. He then resigned his membership of Antiquity, resigning it to what was called the honorary list, which means you're really still a member, but you don't pay any fees, I don't think, and so on and so forth. So you know what's going on. These manuscripts, they were written shortly after the 1813 Union, and there were 3 books, 3 hard card-bound books. Only 2 appear to have survived, numbers 2 and 3, covering the 2nd and 3rd degrees. And there are also quite a lot of lectures and some Royal Arch stuff. These are all really quite significant, and I'll be covering more of those in future presentations. Now, while he was in Antiquity, he worked with William Preston and with his system of lectures, at times in front even of the Duke of Sussex in the chair. And he was several times a clause holder. Now, a clause holder was a chap who made it his business to know certain parts of the lecture system, Preston's lecture system, and they were called upon whenever they were needed. So it was his party piece. He was clause holder of several pieces. His copy of Preston's syllabus, which contains his own notes for all 3 degrees, is in our lodge archive here at Chichester, although it was listed as being lost. That statement occurs in Percy James's paper, The First Lecture of Freemasonry by William Preston, in AQC volume 82 on page 107. There, Percy James says it was lost. Well, it's not, it's here, it's quite safe. And in the full paper, you will see a couple of scans, a couple of pages, just to show that it is in fact available to me, and I shall be covering that in more detail. Now, back to our friend Sherwood. When he was in Chichester, he maintained his connections with the Antiquity members, his friends up there in London, such as Hippolyto da Costa, Stephen Jones, William Preston himself, Christian Burkhardt, William Williams. Now, there's an interesting name, which people may not quite recognise. William Williams, he was a provincial Grand Master of Dorset. And if any of our English brethren of a certain age may remember a bank called Williams and Deans, well, he was the Williams of Williams and Deans. And because he was fairly well-to-do, when the United Grand Lodge in 1813 wanted to have the Book of Constitutions redone, they called on William Williams to produce it, which he did. And we have a couple of copies here in Chichester, and he signed personally every copy of the first United Grand Lodge of England Book of Constitutions. That was to protect against copyright, because the earlier James Anderson's constitutions were plagiarized by all sorts of people around the world, particularly people in America. So William Williams made sure that didn't happen. Now, moving back to where we were, with Sherwood in Lodge of Antiquity, fortuitously, the Reverend Dr. Samuel Hemming, who was master of the Lodge of Reconciliation here, that was the lodge which put together the kind of rituals that we are dealing with today, reconciling between the workings of the ancients and the workings of the moderns, and producing very much what we do today. Anyway, fortunately, Dr. Samuel Hemming, although he spent much of his time in London, he had the clerical living at a village called Lavant, which is a small village a mile or so north of Chichester. And he was the rector there. And he was called upon by our John Sherwood on several occasions to come into Chichester and to show people what all the new workings were. And this is quite valuable. We have complete records of what he was doing, when he was visiting, and how many people, and all the rest of it. Because the lodges in the general area, from Portsmouth through to Arundel and beyond, right along the south coast, they would come along to Chichester to learn from Samuel Hemming what was being decided in London. Now, the manuscripts, which are the subject of this paper, they'd have been in 3 bound books, as I've just said, and only 2 of them survive, covering the 2nd and 3rd degrees with pre- and post-Union openings, so we can see what was going on and how things were changed. And the full paper goes into some detail in comparing them with the before and after, as well as with Percy James's records, as well as the syllabus edition, which I mentioned earlier on. Now, he gives, in his manuscripts, they're not just, lectures and stuff written straight off. He analyzes them, and he gives numerous references. Some of the notes are in Greek, some in Hebrew, and quite a number of erudite comments from the learned gentleman, which he undoubtedly was. It appears to me that these manuscripts add to the body of early 19th century research, as well as giving further confirmatory information over what we are tending to do these days. So that is the basic introduction that I can give you, which gives some context to the manuscripts which you have presumably read the paper about. So from here on in, we can look at some questions. If any brethren have got any questions prepared, then please let's have them. What will happen there is that as this session is being recorded, many of the questions, any that are of any complication, we'll take them and they'll be replied to in writing, which will then appear in AQC after the paper itself, which is our normal practice. There may be a few short comments that I can comment off the cuff here. I'm recognizing quite a few faces I can see on the screen in front of me, which is quite encouraging. So when I mentioned the different languages which John Sherwood made his notes in, Greek and Latin and Hebrew, well, one of the brethren here has helped me a lot with the Hebrew side of it, and we shall see that much more so in later presentations. So let's take it from there. Any questions, please, brethren?
Yes, thank you so much, Brother Hugh. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Wonderful. I'm speaking from a car in Sweden, so I think it's a first in the QC's history.
Yes.
First of all, to begin with, I would like to thank you, the gratefulness of the Lodge, for the paper presented by you, Brother O'Neill. The Union of 1813 is still an episode that generates lots of history and historiography, actually, and which is very fascinating. Just recently, I found new evidence concerning the activities of the Swedish envoy to London, who attended also the union of the 2 lodges, Jacob Gustav Pontus and Della Gardi, and that shows. And which not have been treated before. But it shows only how fascinating things can be. So also with your documents that you have found, because of course the union between ancients and moderns is a big thing. And here the Sherwood Neo-Uni manuscripts definitely come in. I think that without doubt Sherwood was trained into the concept of Freemasonry as developed and disseminated by William Preston and his circles. So it was extremely rewarding to see your treatment of Sherwood's manuscripts. It also highlights the fact that the high importance of local archives, actually, because I didn't know. I mean, who knew about these documents before you were talking about them? You said they have been treated before in a AQC volume, if I understand you correctly. But how come that these volumes have been preserved for such a long time? And moreover, what do you think should be done to preserve them for the future? So that is my question with which I want to open the discussion.
Well, I can give you some off the cuff answers there. No, these particular manuscripts have not been covered in AQC at all. Now, the lodge here in Chichester has always suffered over its 200-year life with lack of spacious premises. They've met in rooms over pubs and all that sort of thing all these times. And even our present premises, which are quite large, but there is nowhere to store stuff other than metal cabinets and boxes and so on. Now, what this has meant is that they have not been on view. They have been tucked away, and hardly anybody has ever looked at them. So that's how they've been preserved. And preserved they have been. They are quite undamaged, along with a number of other things. 1738 Book of Constitutions and some various editions of Preston's illustrations and lots of correspondence and so on, which some of which I've already gone through. But there is so much material there. But the brethren really don't want to dig around. Besides, they've been behind lock and key for all these years. So very seldom do people actually go into these cupboards. Well, I've gone in there. I've found things, as Neville Cryer used to do. He would go out visiting and he'd say, "What's in there?" "Oh, don't know. Don't think we've got the key." "Well, let's have it open." And, he would find stuff and wrote the most wonderful stuff. And I learned a lesson or two from Neville. So that is why the stuff is still available. Now, as to future preservation, what I am doing with quite a lot of the written records, the minute books, and so on and so forth, and correspondence, that is being put into our county records office. That is the West Sussex County Records Office. And most of the counties in England have got these public records offices where the contents are available, obviously to researchers, but also to the public under certain conditions. The documents are held there on loan unless they have been specifically donated. And all this stuff is going on loan. UGLE, or rather the Library Museum in London, they know about this, and we have a procedure and a set of conditions, and they match up with the conditions of the Records Office so that we all know what's happening. And the people to contact, of course, secretaries come and go and archivists come and go. So these things are dealt through the lodge itself in terms of contact, if there are any queries. So that is how I see it going forward. And if other lodges would like to perhaps talk to me about that, if they're not sure, then I'd be only too pleased to give them a hand.
Did you do any digital copies of them as well, or ordinary photocopies that are available, or is it? Do you have to go to the original volumes right now?
Yes, you have to go to the actual documents themselves, but you can ask the Records Office to copy stuff, but they do make a small charge for doing that. And that's fair enough. That's fair enough.
Yeah, sure.
There, you can say, if you want, that certain documents only will be copyable. To start with, I'm only putting the stuff in there which is over 100 years old, particularly minute books, and that keeps something fairly private. If researchers want to get hold of stuff, then there's really no problem there, and they know who the local researchers are, as well as people who come from outside. So that's fair enough.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Please, if there are any other questions, just go ahead and ask them.
Worshipful Master Orville Newman, Leicester, can I first of all congratulate our speaker for his paper and thank him for it. It's a very important paper because it throws a great deal of light upon a question that has been bothering me for some time. If London, in an age when no printed rituals were available, yes. if London made changes, how on earth were these changes communicated to lodges in the province? Did the provincial lodges know about them, or indeed even care about them? And I know of a lodge in Leicester, an ancient lodge, which continued even into the 1820s, conducting rituals and conducting ceremonies that were strictly illegal and irregular so far as Grand Lodge was concerned. And when I think about the Lodge of Reconciliation and about how they're trying to marry the rituals together, and how they invited Masons to come down, say from Newcastle or from York or from Chester, to come down to London to see the ceremonies taking place. Whether or not these delegates took notes, but then they go back home and they've been traveling by stagecoach, which is not perhaps the best form of traveling. They go back home, and I suspect that most of them have completely forgotten what it is they've picked up in London. So this remains a very, very great problem indeed. And the more light we can throw upon it, the better. So again, I thank the speaker for that. Can I also make the comment about lodge archives? In Leicestershire, way back in 2006, we began a policy of inviting all lodges to deposit their non-used records, the records they weren't actually in use at the present time, like old minute books and declaration books, invited them to deposit them in a provincial archive under our control. We found a lot of instances of such lodge archives disappearing when, for example, the secretary in office died and his widow couldn't stand all this rubbish and just chipped it into the bin just like that. So we now have a policy of inviting lodges to deposit their archives. They're still available for consultation by the lodge members. I agree the problem of how people outside the lodge will be able to consult and deal with them is an issue that we haven't yet been able to deal with properly. But we are in the first case very, very insistent that we can get every lodge to deposit its historic records. We know that our county record office might be willing to take stuff, but on the other hand, we know that it is short of space. And so I suspect they are really delighted that we're doing it instead. But can I urge all lodges and all provinces to try to copy that example and to put their records in a place of safety so that they'll be available for future generations. As our speaker has shown, these records are absolutely vital for our understanding of what our predecessors were doing 200 years ago. So I thank him again very much.
Aubrey, first of all, I'm honored that you are here, and I'm I'm also honored that you feel that these records are important. I certainly feel they're important too. And yes, this business of the storage of archives, I'll tell you two little stories. Well, actually, the first one is to do with the first question you put about how on earth did the information about reconciliation get broadcast around the country? Well, just as you said, just as you said, I've found much the same as I've traveled around, that you see so many different workings in different lodges with their own quirks and so on. And some of these little quirks are really quite ancient things, and they've carried on doing them. And you're quite right, I believe, that the people, if they even visited London, and quite a lot of people didn't, I know my Derbyshire lodge didn't, they couldn't be bothered with what was going on in London, nothing to do with them, you know. So they carried on their own sweet way, and they still do. And that's, you know, Derbyshire, strong in the arm, thick in the head. But they're very, you know, they're very brusque in their moods. Now, so yes, these people would travel by stagecoach or horse. It's the only way of getting around. And of course, after several days' journey, being joggled around and perhaps held up once or twice by broken wheels or even highwaymen, you know, you aren't going to remember too much of what you've just been listening to. The finer detail is going to disappear. So that is one of the wonders of our masonry here in England, that we have all these different variations all around the country, and it makes visiting so interesting. Now, so far as the archives are concerned, yes, most provinces have got museum and library areas, and on two occasions in the last couple of 100 years, Sussex province asked our lodge if they could borrow some of our stuff for exhibitions in their museum. And on both those occasions, the stuff was never returned. A few years ago, one of the provincial grandmasters had the bright idea of having a caravan touring around the tourist South Coast towns with Masonic stuff in, and they asked us for some stuff, and I said, over my dead body, I'm afraid you haven't returned the last lot, various lots of stuff that we've lent to you, so that's the end of that. You know, we've managed to hang on to the stuff, so apart from the stuff that they have lost. So I felt that it was much safer to put it in the hands of professional archivists. The archivists at province are very seldom professional. They will see if they can find some space for this stuff, and access to them is difficult, usually. Whereas records offices, the documents are all recorded and catalogued, and they are accessible, or at least you will know where they are and what they are, through the archive to archive system. So you can question any document and see which records office has got it, and then you can make ask for copies of stuff, or you can arrange to go and see stuff. And it is there, it is permanent, it's run by a local authority, and the environment, the humidity, the temperature, the security are all there. Whereas you don't get that in a provincial building. So personally, I feel that that is the better way of doing it for the security of the documents. I tell you, if you give the records office stuff, they first put it into a quarantine to make sure it hasn't got stuff, insects and live things in there tucked into the bindings that's going to destroy stuff. They quarantine it all, and they make sure that it is all dead. So I'm not sure if you have any ideas about that, Aubrey.
Well, our first job is having it preserved,
Yes.
and we're so worried about lodges that have, in fact, lost their records under all sorts of ways, above all by being destroyed by people who didn't know what they're doing, to have them at least preserved as something. And we hope we'll be able to develop a proper system for consultation, which is our next step forward.
Yes, that's absolutely so. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. In fact, some of the documents that I've come across locally had in fact been filched from a solicitor's office's archives and tucked away and by an individual. And eventually we managed to retrieve it in an anonymous sort of way. But even then, we're not sure whether we've got absolutely everything. I mean, his widow is now died, and she said before she died that there's nothing left in the attic. So that, we've got to take her word for that. But that is the sort of thing that you do come across. Yes, secretaries come and go, and there'll be a few suitcases tucked away somewhere. Under the billiard table or, under the bed or something like that. Oh, clear the lot out, off it goes. In fact, my Derbyshire Lodge, which has been around for over 200 years, they used to have a roll, well, they still do, a roll of all the members from day one back in 1785. This disappeared, and one of the members' wives happened to be moseying around the town, and she was looking in, one of these bric-a-brac shops, and she saw some parchments which seemed to her to be Masonic. So she said to the chap who was on the point of cutting them up to make lampshades, please just hang on. I'm going to ask my husband to come along. I don't think they ought to be cut up. And if you don't mind, anyway, he said, yes, that's it, right. So when he came along, he had looked at it. It was these rolls of every member that ever had been. Their occupations and, roughly where they lived and their dates and all that sort of stuff on these scrolls. So he convinced the chap to hand them over. I think some silver changed a few palms there, but that has all been preserved, and the stuff actually goes up at every installation meeting, so you can see where they are, including one of the archbishops of Canterbury. So that's rather nice. So
any other questions? Please come forward.
Actually, I don't have any much of intelligence to add to the discussion, but a couple of reactions, if I may, Hugh. I had the luck to be present when your worshipful master's predecessor, Yasha Berezina, visited Chichester, and Hugh showed him these documents, and his reaction was, wow. And in fact, we had difficulty getting him downstairs to come and talk.
Well, Neville gave exactly the same. Neville Cryer gave exactly the same response as well when he saw some of the stuff we had.
Yeah.
In fact, some of that stuff has been incorporated into some of his books.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned, Worshipful Master, you mentioned Lagarde. Well, he actually, I understand, he was rather less than hot about the idea of the union in the first place. I think he tried to prevent it, but eventually ended up presiding at the union ceremony in the chair. Now, the actual variations on the when they came down to instruct the brethren, we still ended up with 60 odd rituals used in England alone. When did they lighten up on that and not insist on these particular rituals being worked in the lodges? I also, now this will interest Brother Fred Sells. I was initiated as a Prince Hall Mason in the Bahamas. I was known as the White Brother, by the way. Now, Hugh, I'm at your disposal anytime you wish with the Hebrew elements of Sherwood's works.
Thank you very much, Doug.
My pleasure. That's all I have to say.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, there might be other questions, but I'm so curious, Hugh, about the volume number 1. Do you have any theory where it might be? Because it seems to me that it just be tucked away in your library somewhere, or do you really think this has gone missing? Because it would be such a great addition to the work you're doing on these manuscripts.
No, it's not. It's not in our archive anywhere at all. It has disappeared. It has disappeared. It doesn't appear. In fact, none of the books appear in the inventories, in the older inventories. So it's rather strange, but there it is. We have 2 out of 3, which is better than no out of 3. Yes, it's a shame. It's a great pity, because the first one, I think, would be very revealing. Already, the second and third books have some most interesting stuff in. I've only just scratched on the surface with this paper. We'll dig quite deeper later on.
And that interests me as well, because you are giving us some cliffhangers in your paper that you will be digging deeper. So what can we expect from this? I mean, do you think that he simply he was a kind of disciple of Preston? Yes, but did he also have his own ideas about Freemasonry? What do you think? What can we expect from your discoveries?
Yes, he had his own ideas about the meanings of things. Now, in the full paper, which I'm not sure if you have seen yourself, Andreas, but I'm just looking at the contents of book number 2, and we have titles such as Morality, the Ark, Numbers of the Name, Abraxa, Parallelogram, Lilywork. Where are we? The Middle Chamber, Sacred Symbols, Tetractys, Description of the Temple, the Platonic Bodies, and so on and so forth. All these subjects, and he goes into considerable detail in explaining this, that, and the other. He was a very knowledgeable, very keen chap. He was a bachelor, it appears, throughout his life, so he had plenty of time on his hands. He had a housekeeper, so he didn't have to bother too much. And, he could just settle down. This would be a relaxation from his legal work.
Yeah.
Legal work. He gives him the Latin and the ability to write well and clearly.
I saw these lists, which made me very curious. And I was thinking about if he maybe conceived of doing some kind of Masonic encyclopedia, because we have all these, these important words that he was structuring his text with, or is it a commentary to Preston? How much have you been able to compare between those two?
Yes, with the or rather tucked into the syllabus, which we have here, are his own notes about the answers to the questions. And one of the problems with the syllabus is that we have all the questions, and quite a lot of the sections don't have answers. Well, he has written the answers out. These are missing from Percy James's analysis. So this is yet to come. Yes, I'm sorry about all the cliffhanging, but that is, I'm afraid, how it is. There is too much to give in one go. We'd be here for a month.
Wonderful. Oh, well, great. But then, I mean, there will be some continuation of part 2 and 3 and 4 you will be presenting to us.
Oh, yes.
Wonderful. I'm looking so much forward to, because it's really very exciting, new findings and new manuscripts. Any other questions? Please come forward if you want to ask something.
Andreas, if I might, David
Yes,
Peck.
sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Hugh, for a very interesting both paper and lecture. I think you've raised a number of interesting parallel subjects, one of which, of course, is archiving and documentation. And one of the issues I've been trying to live with in Buckinghamshire is that we've, for instance, my chapter has merged with another chapter. And the documents will simply go into archive eventually. But whether they'll be properly catalogued is another matter altogether. And of course, if someone doesn't actually check the cataloguing of a non-Masonic person, then of course the record may not be recoverable in any suitable form when you're looking back in the archives or even knowing where it is. So one thing I've proposed is that in my now merged chapter, that we actually generate basically a PDF copy. We scan all the existing documents, and although we release the actual original documents to an archive system, we also have a copy that brethren could access if they so wished. Do you have any comment on that?
Yes, I have, as you've seen, if you see the full paper, I have digitized some, well, certainly virtually all of these two books, well, all of these two books, but quite a lot of the other stuff. Those who haven't seen it, I'm just showing up to the camera one of the pages. So the whole lot is digitized of that. And anything which is also worthwhile, particularly correspondence with the Dukes of Richmond, who were members of the lodges here, those things are of particular interest too. And they've all been digitized, and I'm gradually working through them. There is so much to do. I mean, each of these two books is over 100 pages each. I've got boxes, large cardboard boxes full of correspondence, and I'm gradually working through the more important stuff. I'm wearing out my my scanner. It's never done quite so much work in its life. So, yes, I'm going through all of that. Yes, it is all catalogued. As I do it, it is catalogued. And it will also carry the reference of the County Records Office, as well as our own inventory reference where there is one. So there's a cross-reference where somebody may have used our inventory reference somewhere, then we can say, yes, we know that, and it's in the Records Office, and its number is so-and-so. So we can, you know, that helps in access of the documents. Does that help, David? It's good to see you along. Good to see you.
The other question I've got is more a generic one for really all the audience here today. That, you know, we all come across Masonic references which we don't know how to communicate them to the greater world without writing a paper or, you know, doing something else. It just seems to me that there's a lot of material out there, as you've shown from your work, which could be made available and isn't simply by inactivity. I've got to admit, I'm partially guilty. I was digging around in what was a Roman Catholic archive in Malta and came across the original documents from the Inquisitor in the late 1770s.
Wonderful.
But the fascinating thing there, I'll show you a copy of it. There was a ritual book with what's a tracing board.
Wow.
Now, yeah, I've
wow.
all these photographs. They're on my computer, taken in 2016.
Wow.
It's actually part of a Lodge of Marseille, apparently a ritual book. But I've got no idea what to do with it. It just, you know, it needs more work doing. And you know, I think we need almost some sort of forum for which people could, you know, say, okay, I've discovered this. Is anyone interested in taking it further?
Yes, it is. It is a difficult thing, and this is where professional archivists come in the records offices, because you can tell them what it is, and they can reference it. Their cataloging systems are very, very good, and they can preserve the original anyway. But it is then available in the A2A archive to archive system to anybody who wants to inquire.
So I think in this case, the resources were there in the archive for the two archivists running the whole place. These documents probably never been opened since 1770.
Well, that's right, but that's why this stuff is well, the electronic archives are online, so people are looking for stuff on a particular subject. The relevant documents will pop up. Oh yes, haven't seen that. I must go find it.
That presupposes that the archivist understands what he sees. I mean, as you said, you were in the Malta archives, and this was there. The archivist wouldn't have known what it was. You, with your specialist knowledge, David, and were able to pick it up and to see what it is.
Yes. So when you put
that's the problem.
We haven't got a basin
in every single archives office.
When you put it to the archive office, you tell them what it is.
Yeah.
You don't leave it to the archivist. They are professionals in the storing and the registering and the cataloging of stuff, not so much in the subject, because the subjects are wide, and so on. So yes, the specialist has to tell them what it is, and then they will be able to catalog it accordingly. For instance, just recently, last 5-6 years, one of only 2 copies of the American Declaration of Independence on parchment, a manuscript on parchment, was discovered in the records office inside a bundle of Duke of Richmond's stuff. And it wasn't known until then what it is. Now they know what it is and is catalogued as such.
Right. Okay. I think it's a very fascinating episode, because we have seen over the last 10-20 years that the amount of Masonic manuscripts that is available is increasing, and that also methods to decode their content are increasing. I'm working with a German brother on the Copiale manuscript and what it means and so on. So, I mean, I think we have golden times ahead, and people who believe that Masonic history has been written and there's nothing to add are simply wrong, because we will make these treasure trove findings in the future as well. But my question is if there are any more questions to use paper, or if we are reaching a point where we can finish our question and answers. And
I had a question.
What do you think? Sure, please go ahead.
Are the scans going to be published publicly at some point in time? I put it in the chat. Are the
do you hear the question? If the scans could be made publicly available?
I'm sorry, could you say again?
Are the scans going to be made publicly available at some point in time?
Well, those that I put into AQC, they will be, certainly. But the original documents, they're being recorded in the local records office, so they'll be on A2A.
Okay. So at some point they will be...
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes,
okay.
Indeed. Yeah. Yeah.
And you're going to have a reference to that in the
yes,
AQC?
Indeed. And the records office here, they scan every document that goes in there. So, if the place goes up in flames, which is most unlikely, but if it does, then they've got a backup copy in the cloud, basically.
Perfect. I'd like to look at it, that's all, at some point.
Yeah. At the moment, it's not, because it's going through the early processes. Yeah.
There's a ton of material coming up into the scans. For instance, the release of the periodicals at the Grand Lodge Library.
Yeah.
I took a look at that, and I did a huge. I uploaded all of the Kipling papers, all of the information on Kipling, and there was probably 20 articles, some of which I hadn't even looked at or knew about beforehand.
Yeah. Have you got, talking of Kipling, have you got a copy of his Just So stories?
No.
Okay. Because if you get hold of a copy of that, one of the stories is called The Butterfly That Stamped. The Butterfly That Stamped. And the first illuminated letter of that story is the letter T. And if you just hold on one moment, I will show it to you. If you just hold on one moment while I just go, and it's just behind me, just a moment.
One of the things they had put up that I had found through one of the articles that I had gotten out of the library was that Kipling had used a Philthought on the front of all of his books. And of course, as it became a problem with the war effort, he dropped it off of all of the books. But it turned out the Philthought he had used as his Mark Master Mason mark. And it was just a little one paragraph in one of the articles I had found. Not that I want to get off topic.
No, not at all. It's great.
Here we are.
And now you is back again, please. Okay, go ahead.
Right. The Butterfly That Stamped. You can see that image there. Is that back to front? No, it's forwards.
Yeah.
It's a figure seated, and if you look, he's wearing a Masonic apron.
Oh, yes.
And dangling from his wrist is a square and compasses. You won't be able to read this, but the sash that he's wearing has the letters which are on the mark.
Yeah, I can see it.
Jewel. And there are several other things there. And it has his initials right down at the bottom, RK.
Did you know there's a gavel that Kipling signed in one of the Canadian lodge rooms? He had given it as a gift, and they have it in a shadow box up in the lodge building. And it's, as far as they're concerned, it's the Kipling gavel.
Absolutely, yeah.
One of the people he had served in the military with, he'd given it to him as a present when he became Worshipful Master, and it sat in the secretary's drawer for over 50 years before somebody realized the value and did the looked up the history on the on it.
Yes, that is always the thing, isn't it? Somebody will. The chances of somebody recognizing what something is.
Right.
This happens all the time. I was looking through a bundle of papers to do with the Duke of Richmond, and I came across a letter from de Segouliers to the second Duke. I mean, for goodness sake. It was just there in a bundle of papers. Aubrey's got a copy of that. I sent him.
Yes. But it just emphasizes the importance that not merely you look at something, you've got to understand what it is you're looking at.
Oh, yes, it tells a story, doesn't it, Aubrey?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, could you imagine finding a gavel? Well, a letter from de Segouliers or a gavel from Kipling sitting just sitting in a bundle somewhere.
That's right. Yeah. Anyway.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Okay.
Dear
How are we getting on?
Yeah. Are there any more questions about the paper?
Yes, I would like to ask.
Sure, please go ahead.
I'm going through the papers. I see the way the degrees were being worked, second degree, and the movement of the wardens. Now, does that have any relationship to what tracing boards they were using then, or you're still using the same tracing boards you had then?
Yes. the tracing boards are a very interesting subject. Excuse me. You see, tracing boards really started to come about in the late 1700s. There were no regulations about standardized designs or anything like that. Usually a mason would do the painting, and he would have his own interpretation. Very often the tracing board was used as an aide-memoire for the lecture around it. You see, they'd really stopped using the lecture system, or that was dying out. It was all a time of change. The tracing boards that we have nowadays, quite a lot of the old ones are still in use. Here in Chichester, we have the 1811 Josiah Bowring ones. Each set is unique, and we have one of the 12 sets that are known. And these are, each set that you come across, whoever painted them, are basically unique. And they're, if you like, the figments of the imagination of the painters. Some of them were quite good and some were not very good. Even John Harris, who sort of grabbed the market by winning a competition from the Emulation Lodge of Improvement with his designs, you can pick faults in them because he got rather too elaborate in the end, and they became somewhat cluttered. The simpler designs show the story very much better, in a lot of people's eyes. So, no, we don't really know what, but in this case of Sherwood, yes, we do know what tracing boards he used, and they are the ones that we have today. And they are the Josiah Bowring ones. And if you get a copy of Terry Hornsh's book, Tracing Boards and Their Designers, it is available, usually from someone like ABE Books. That will show practically all of the main types of boards that have been around, and a description of them and of their designers and some of their history. So that is quite actually a useful little book to have about tracing boards. That's the one. That's the one, dear old Terry. Yes, he. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Can I draw attention that Brother Fred Sells has asked a question? It's on the chat. It's on the
right.
chat.
What was the question? Sorry. Can you?
He asked, do the manuscripts reflect differences from the ritual of Brother Preston's lectures?
Yeah, that's a good question. Hugh, what do you say?
Yes. Let me think now. Yes. You'll find that in the main paper that I did, the full paper that appears in AQC, you will see the comparison there. It's somewhat complicated to go into now, but yes, there is a comparison there, along with comparisons to the syllabus. Okay.
Right. Thank you so much. Any more questions? Otherwise, I will take the right to ask the last question to you, Brother Hugh. When can we expect the next next part in the series?
On behalf of the editorial committee,
Exactly.
Yes, I also like an answer to that question.
Yeah, good.
When it's finished.
All right.
Well, I'm well into the next one.
Good.
And I hope to do it have it done within the next few months. It's quite a job. It's quite a job. A lot of research that you have to do, as you will all know.
Wonderful. That sounds really great.
Okay, my pleasure.
Yeah.
Worshipful Master.
Yes, thank you.
Worshipful Master, can I just
Yes.
answer Brother Fred's question? I've actually, I mentioned I was initiated as Prince Hall Mason in the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of the Bahamas in 1979. And I can see quite a large similarity between in the more light ritual to that which was recorded by John Sherwood.
All right.
Most interesting.
How could that be explained, do you think?
Well, obviously the original rituals were taken by the early Scottish and Irish settlers across the other side of the ocean.
It proves that we need to continue working on these issues across our obediences, across Grand Lodges, and that groundwork, as you have presented to us today, Brother Hugh, is so valuable. So, with these words, I'd like to thank you again for your paper, for your presentation on YouTube, for your recap today at this Zoom meeting, and for all of you showing up on this significant day for Masonic, of Masonic tradition, basically, St. John's Day. And let's hope that we soon will be able to meet again. We have heard rumors and ideas that we will have our September meeting at Great Queen Street, and I truly hope that no variety of that horrible virus that has spread across the globe and has put so much obstacles into the way for us to meet will make it impossible for us to meet in September. And I would so much looking forward to greet you all personally when coming to London in September. So let's keep our fingers crossed and do our best, get our vaccines, and hopefully we'll soon be able to meet again. And with that being said, I want to wish you a very nice summer and call off this meeting. Thank you very much.